Come on.
Hi, I'm Tom.
And I'm Ian.
And we're Icarus. We're here in our Bristol studio and we're going to break down our track No Sleep, which was released on our EP In the Dark earlier this year. We're going to go through it and see how we made it.
So we'll start talking about the strings. The strings kind of form the basis of this track. That's how the idea for the whole track started, just with these two chords kind of looping. That's just a contact instrument with a few plugins. So what we tend to do is we'll use plugins like Contact for strings and things, and then once we're kind of happy with the sound of it, we'll bounce it down to audio.
What have we got on the MIDI?
So on the MIDI, we've got
J37.
A J37, which is kind of like a tape emulation, just to kind of degrade the sound a bit, make them sound a little bit rougher. Again, and a bit more, we've got the isotope vinyl plugin. So you can hear before that plugin, it's got a little bit more top end, and with that on, with the wear up here, it kind of just softens them a little bit more. After that, we've got a direction mixer. That's just bringing the spread in to 0.4, just so it doesn't get lost when it's monoed.
So obviously quite a wide sample.
Yeah.
So when we've noticed before when we've produced tunes and then gone and played them in a club, if the setup is mono, then some sounds just get lost. So that's something that we're aware of now, and we just make sure that our mixes can work in that environment without things just disappearing.
Yeah, and strings tend to be quite wide because of how they're recorded. So you can hear that's a lot wider.
It's quite different.
So that might get lost a bit.
Yeah.
And then just an EQ at the end just to get rid of any rumble in the low end. So that's how the track started, those two string chords, layered with this other higher string part, which is just like a pedal thing. Kind of similar plugins on that.
No, reversed, is it?
No, I think that's
how it sounded.
That's how it was. And those two layered just kind of give us the intro of the track. So yeah,
that's probably what we started with, and then probably went through. We tend to use quite a lot of old school sounding drum breaks in our tracks, so we probably would have started messing around with some different breaks.
Yeah, so we had that progression and then dropped this break in, a famous break, and it kind of just worked really nicely with the strings. And then we just started layering up some other hits that we like the sound of, chopped up some samples, so just play those bits on their own so you can hear the different parts. So that was like an old hip hop break.
Yeah.
Just some cool little hits in.
We tend to go through loads and loads of little drum bits to kind of add into our grooves rather than just using like one break or one loop to make up the drums. We'll try and add little bits and bobs in which kind of give it a bit more flavour and just make things a bit different.
So there's another little sample here. It's like a little bit of an amen percussion just to give that a little bit more groove. And as the intro of the track progresses, we introduce some other percussive elements. So that's like a rim shot.
I think it's probably worth mentioning like the EQs and stuff. So sometimes.
So yeah, this.
Yeah.
There's
3 different EQs on.
3 EQs on this one. First one, just getting rid of the low end.
Yeah.
I'm pulling out a bit of the harsh frequencies around 1 and 2K, a bit at 5. and kind of the same on the next one. Obviously felt like it wasn't quite enough just sitting in the mix there.
Sometimes we'll find a sample that we like the sound of, but it has got some harsh frequencies, or frequencies that sound harsh to our ears anyway, so we'll just start pulling things out until we're completely happy with how that sounds and how it sits in the mix. So sometimes that takes more than one EQ.
So after that we've got Transient Designer just pulling down a little bit of the attack, just taking off that transient a bit to soften it, so you can hear the difference there. And again a direction mixer just to pan it slightly, just to give the mix a little bit more width. So we do that sometimes if we've got a lot of elements in the drums. We'll try and give them their own space. So a little bit of panning here and there, just to kind of allow them to sit in the mix a bit better. So this is where the kick drum comes in. And we add quite a lot more drums.
I mean, we've layered two in this, haven't we? So we've layered two kicks together, which is something which we do quite a lot. It's kind of rare that we can find one sample that we like absolutely all of it. So you can see with this example, we've added another one on top to add a bit of texture.
It's just got that kind of
Like
live acoustic, a bit of room on there.
And that's just something we'll experiment with until we find something we like, and that's just the main bulk. That's the kind of quite a clubby kick, but then if that was on its own, it probably wouldn't sit in with all the other kind of roughy drums as well, which is why we've added the texture.
Yeah, so just to talk through how we kind of approach our drums, we'll split all of the elements, so we'll have kicks and claps and snares and things separated out, and we'll route our kick and our clap through a bus. So we always have that set routing through bus one is always kick and clap, or kick and snare, and then bus two is all our other percussion. So that just means that if we want to apply some processing to our percussion and things like that, it kind of groups it, and we can do it in one go. So we'll quite often put the sausage fattener plugin on our percussion bus, just so it kind of gels all the sounds a little bit better.
It gives a nice kind of grit as well, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Depending on how hard you go, and you can go quite full on with that plugin.
Yeah, so that just gives it like a little bit more bite. It's quite subtle, but just gives it a little bit more bite to that. And then we'll have those two buses routed through another bus. So bus 20 is our entire drum bus. So all of our drums get routed through the same bus there, and that's got just a little bit of compression on it, not much at all. Just again to kind of glue the sounds together. And on this particular project, we put a little bit of EQ. It's very subtle. I think it's 0.3 just at the top there. It just kind of makes it sound like one kind of kit rather than loads of different separate samples. So another technique we tend to use on our drums, we'll parallel compress our kick. We'll have an own dedicated parallel compression bus for our kick drum, just to give a little bit more punch, basically. So you can hear, if I take this send off, it's a lot softer. And once you add in the parallel compression, just cuts through the mix a little bit more. So it's set to quite a hard compression, but we only mix in, this is set to -9 dB, so it's only a slight level of signal coming through. So it doesn't really squash it loads, but it just adds a little bit more bite. So we'll have one of those set up on the kick and on our percussion as well, just so that it's not trying to compress all of the signals all at the same time, because if you've got kind of complex patterns, it can't really cope, it doesn't really keep up. So we'll try and keep, generally we make 4/4 kick drum, that's the kind of pattern we have in our tunes. So if we just have a dedicated one for that, it keeps it nice and even, and just, yeah, makes the drums punch a little bit more.
Again, like, that was kind of the thing that when we first learnt about that, we applied it to our drums, and it's not always a sort of one size fits all.
Yeah.
You can get in a habit of when you learn a new technique, just thinking, oh, that's great, let's just set that up and then cool, that's it. Nowadays, we do kind of use our ears a lot more. So if you hear a kick sample, for example, and then you put it in the project, and it's not, it can change quite a lot, can't it? When you put it in, you go, oh, all of that compression on it is actually making it not sound very nice. So we'll edit how much things are sent to fit the project.
So there's actually an example of that. This rim shot here, we obviously didn't feel it needed the parallel, because we've taken the transient attack down a lot. Yeah. So we didn't apply the
parallel. We just kind of add it back in.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not. It doesn't apply to everything all the time.
And just talking about where we get our drum samples from, I guess we've been building up a bank of samples for probably 10 years or so now. So it's a selection of like old Loop Masters CDs and swapping your sample banks with other producer mates, downloading bits and bobs online. We've recorded some of our own stuff as well, just like atmospheres we record on our phones. Anything really like that we think can work in a track. Nowadays, we don't tend to download huge sample packs anymore. I mean, we've got a lot anyway, so that's one reason, but we now use a website called Splice, which you can just kind of go through hundreds of packs and you're able to just pick one or two things. So we'll just do that now, won't we? And just pull the site up or pull the plugin up and just listen through different drum samples with the actual track playing. And that's where we get all our drums from, really. We've got quite a lot of things hitting at the same point. So we use sidechain compression quite a lot. So with our percussion, and like with dance music in general, you kind of want the kick to be pretty prominent. Like Ian was saying, it's very frequently a 4/4 pattern. So we'll tend to duck. You can see the sidechain working here. We will duck our percussion to the kick drum, and if our snare or our clap is falling on the same note, then we'll duck it to that, because otherwise it gives you more headroom and it just gives those more prominence in the mix as well, which we kind of like and what is sort of expected out of dance music.
It also gives the drums quite a nice groove and pump, gives them a bit more kind of dynamic than just having all the samples just at one level.
There's a couple of different ways of doing it, really, isn't there? So sometimes we'll have, if the kick is not on 2 and 4, we can duck stuff to the kick so it just gets out the way of the kick drum. Or in this example, we'll set up a sidechain channel which has got a signal coming out, but not actually, it's not audible, and we'll just sidechain to that muted signal. So that it's pumping to the beat, isn't it, rather than actually getting out the way of specific drum samples.
Yeah. From there, we got the drums and the strings. We layered in piano, just doing the same chords as the string, just to develop the track. On this particular one, we're using a piano, and then the chord is reversed into itself again here. So you've got the piano playing the chord, and then at the end it reverses. Just gives it kind of a nice swell. So that comes in. after 16 bars, and then we've done like a little transition effects with the piano. So we've bounced one of the chords and put some effect on it, some modulation, maybe a bit of reverb, and then reversed it just to kind of help with the transition into the next section.
We do that quite a lot, really, don't we? Like, it adds a nice kind of suck into a new section.
Yeah, and rather than kind of picking like a stock effects or reverse, something like that, we kind of try and use what we've already got in there and just change the texture of it a little bit. So that plays into the next section.
We've got another piano coming in. And some lower chords, which I think are the same again, but they're just lower register.
Yeah, just a slightly different voicing.
Yeah.
Just gives it a bit more kind of body. Again, that side chaining.
You can hear that pump, yeah.
So again, it's still just the 2 chords, and we're just building up the layers. Another layer in there, doing the chords. We recorded this sound off the Prophet over there. It's kind of got a nice, kind of rough, noisy texture. And it's got that kind of wobble on it. Another layer in there. There's like a reverse fluty kind of sound, which kind of also helps with the transition, bringing that in. And you can see we've done just a bit of volume automation to introduce the sound. Again, it's not really like a prominent sound, but it's just a little bit of interest.
It's something we'll do, like when we're writing, we tend to write kind of sections, and then you start working on a sort of 16-bar loop for quite a while, and then when you step back and play like from the beginning, and when you get there, sometimes things can jump out, or it just feels like too much of a change, or too much has come in. So then we'll start using techniques like the reverse piano and like the automation on that loop coming up, just to add a nicer flow rather than just kind of stark sections changing.
Yeah, also a way we've tended to write things and come up with different parts and ideas is we will have just a loop section, and we'll record a load of stuff, different sounds, different riffs and things like that, and you might not use it in that part of the track, but we'll save it for later and then come back to it. We might have forgotten about it and then play it again, and then it'll work in a new section of the track. So we'll do that quite a lot. Okay, so to just give those parts kind of how they sit in the context of the track. Just starting with the high string part before we bring the main chords in.
I just noticed, so we've used some sample tape noise and some vinyl crackle as well, which we kind of use fairly often in our tracks to give them more of like an old school flavour, which we quite like. So if we pull the EQs up on there as well. You can see we just take the bottom end out, because on samples like that there will tend to be quite a lot of fluff down the bottom, which we don't need in the mix, but we just kind of want the nice top end, and we usually sidechain those as well. That one isn't.
Okay, so in that
elements.
in that new section, you can hear we've added the bass part, the sub part. We always have a sub part in our tracks, coming from that kind of dance music club background. Just gives that nice bottom end. And in this particular project, we layered 2 different subs. This one just giving a little bit of attack and a bit of punch. You can hear we've taken the low end out of it just to have just the knock, and then that is sitting on top of our main sub, which is an 808. We tend to use 808s for our subs, and then if you hear it with, that's without the punchy top, and that's with it, just gives a tiny bit of attack. Another thing to mention on this sub, we've done some parallel distortion, so just a logic amp with an EQ. So we've taken out the low end on the amp and the top end, and we're just sending just a tiny bit, sending the 808 to that. So this is without. And that's with. So you can hear it just kind of enhances the harmonics of the 808 and brings it out in the mix a little bit more, gives it a bit more attitude. So that all layered. So yeah, so obviously it's very important for the 808 not to conflict with the kick drum. So what we'll do is, you can see here, the output of our subs is bus 25, and bus 25 is sidechaining to the kick. So whenever the kick hits, the sub ducks 2 to 3 dB. So it just means that each has got their own space in the mix, and it doesn't kind of get muddy in the low end, because that happens pretty easily.
Yeah. We'll also, on our kicks, put a low cut up to about 45 hertz, well 50 hertz in this example. Again, just to get out of the way of the sub, because you want your bass line really to be occupying that space. You've still got enough punch from kind of 50 up for the kick drum, and then the sub can sit below.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do. We'll do that in every project.
And the sidechain to kick is something that we can use. It's not just for the sub. If we want to send other musical elements to that, well, if we want to make the output that bus for some of the other musical elements as well, just to add a bit of swell, we'll do that also, or set up another one that's maybe not quite as full on and use that.
Another thing to mention, there's some little vocal samples that we've used on the intro. Quite a lot of processing on them. Kind of not really audible what they're saying, but it just gives a bit of interest to the intro. So I'll take you through what we've got on that. Quite a lot on that one. I'll take them all off. So we've put the audio into the EXS sampler. You hear it's actually a male vocal. So we stuck an auto tune on that, pitched it up an octave, changed the tone of it, the throat of the vocal, just to make it sound a little bit more natural, a little bit less like a chipmunk. Compression, and then mixed in 5 semitones below, reverb, and then just at the end there stuck an EQ on just to get rid of any low end, and then I think just a bit of sidechain to the 1/4.
That's pretty much it for the intro. We've got a little spoken word sample that runs around.
Going up there.
which is from just an interview. We kind of use parts like that in some of our tracks just as another layer of ambience, just adds something a little bit different. And then we're into the breakdown build-up section.
Yeah, so again, to kind of transition from the intro section into the build-up, we've done another effect here, which started off as a guitar, just recorded some guitar, probably recorded something that we didn't end up using in the track. Stuck a load of plugins on that, so we've got some compression, just a bit of panning. Sound Toys, Primal Tap, we use quite a lot of Sound Toys stuff because we really like it. So that's just giving a kind of, it's like
Bit of a slap back, really.
yeah, bit of modulation. An Echo Boy, 2 Echo Boys actually.
It really kind of spaces it out,
Yeah.
gives a sort of dubby effect.
And then just a little bit of EQ at the end there. Take off the top end, and that's sent to a reverb that we also use a lot, which is really good and has loads of different impulse responses and emulations of old reverb units. Altiverb, we use that a lot in our tracks. So sent that to just over 2 seconds plate, just to give it a bit more kind of space. So that effect, I think we reversed that as well. Yeah. So we reversed that and put more delay on it, just to give it a bit of a tail. Just kind of transition.
So you can see we kind of like re-sample things quite a lot and mess around with a lot of different effects just to see what happens, really. It's all experimentation, and then if we find something that we like, we'll go, okay, cool, let's use that and stick with that. And we do quite a lot of our writing like that. And so we've got a new vocal coming here, which again is the same male vocalist.
Yeah, same male vocalist from the intro, but obviously sounds more, it's less pitched.
Yeah.
So we pitched that up just two semitones.
We've just got some slight high cut automation on the drums that go into this section just to make it flow quite nicely, and a bit of volume as well.
Yeah, and we actually automated up the amount of wear on the vinyl plugin on this
Which
as
will
well.
just make it rougher and rougher as it goes in.
Just taking off that top end once the volume goes down.
We've got weird feedback there. Can't remember where that came from.
I can't remember either. Do you want to talk about the...
And then the JV 1080, yeah.
So this is kind of the other main part of the track, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like the main drop, really.
Kind of like a staccato. Actually, I think that was tremoloed, that one.
Sounds like it, yeah.
So that's just 2 chords, you can see there. With the tremolo on and sound on the JV 1080.
Yep.
So you can hear actually the tremolos on this guitar rig plugin. So it's a step sequence of doing that.
Which again will have just been experimentation.
Yeah. So layered, that's layered with some string parts doing the same.
Just kind of beef it up a bit because the JV 1080 sound is kind of thin, but it adds a nice sort of resonant, ravey sound to it, but then the strings give it a bit more of a classic old school feel and beef it up.
So we've got that, just working over those 2 chords from the intro. And underneath that, the main bass part that's coming into the drop is something we recorded from the Voyager. Just a kind of simple...
Two-noter again.
Yeah, just like a saw wave.
Just add a bit more warmth, a bit more bottom end as it goes into the main drop, which is where the 808s will come back in.
So you can hear on that we've just automated up in real time the cut-off on there, just to give that sense of build. You can also see on here automating up the high frequencies just before it goes into the drop.
Just adding a few percussive elements in there as well that will automate up in volume or let the high end frequency come up as we go into the drop.
Yes, that's just some offbeat claps, automating up in volume and just a little bit of the top end, just from 12 to 20,000 hertz there, and the tambourine as well. Same sort of principle. So that leads us into the main drop.
Come on.
So again, we brought in all the drums with just a slightly different kick pattern from the intro. So the intro's got the 4/4, and this has got the kind of more of a breakbeat pattern.
So in this instance, this is why we will have ducked the sub, the 808s, to the kick pattern rather than swelling to 1, 2, 3, 4, because you actually want it to get out of the way of the frequency.
Okay, so here, the chords just develop slightly with an extra passing chord there. These piano chords, pretty simple. So they've taken over from the string chords on the intro.
Yeah.
And we just got the Moog here. That's just following the root notes of the chords.
With not a lot of low end.
No, so we filtered out the lows.
Because again, you don't want to be stacking too many frequencies on top of each other. You'll just muddy your mix and lose headroom for when it's mastered.
So that's, just to get out of the way of the sub. So the sub pattern's a little bit more syncopated, just to give it the groove with the drums. You can see the pattern here. And that punch sub is just helping it cut through a little bit more.
And we just kind of like build up the back end of the tune, so we've added a few more, well, brought a few more elements back in and added this new piano riff that comes in. A few more percussive elements that are back in.
Yeah. So we're reintroducing stuff that
Yeah.
you've already heard on the intro over that slightly different chord progression.
This is what we mean, like when we said earlier about sometimes we'll loop a section. We do this quite a lot when we're writing, so a 16-bar loop, we will just play stuff over and just build it and stack it up until there's probably way too much in there, and then we'll start to pull things left and right and try and flesh the tune out and reintroduce things throughout the track, so it kind of makes sense. So you've already heard that on the intro, but then you've waited right until bar 97 to actually hear it introduced again.
So in this section, we're introducing a slightly different piano part, just a higher register to go on top of these lower chords.
Try and add a bit more kind of euphoria at this section. This is pretty much the biggest part of the tune.
So we just got, it's just a 2-note voicing there with some delay on. Pretty straightforward. Just sending that to a bit of reverb and 1/8 dotted delay.
It's probably worth saying about the compressors on the actual delay bus.
So yeah, like with most things, we'll EQ out any muddiness. So this is actually on the delay, taking a bit of top off and just compress the tail, just so it comes out a bit more.
And then is the second compressor side chaining? Yeah.
So that's side chaining
To the riff.
yeah.
So it basically doesn't swamp the sound. We still want the initial hit, the initial bite, and then you want the delay tail. So that's why we compress it to the actual audio, and then compress the tail as well to bring it out in the mix, because you can hear it's quite full at this point. So to actually get the effect, that's why we kind of squash that signal.
So every time the piano hits, the delay ducks and gets out of the way. And the delay is actually sent a little bit to the reverb, the same reverb that the piano's sent to, just to give it a little bit more space again. Just hear that new piano coming in. Again, we've got another little bit of piano, which is very subtle, just to add an extra bit of harmony, really, to that chord, and a little bit more rhythm. So it's probably something that you're not really conscious of when you're listening to the whole mix, but you'd kind of miss it if you took it out.
We've just got a little sort of transition for about a bar, and cut some percussion out to go into this back end. Just to signify, the end of a 16 bar. Just a little drum fill, and then we're into the outro. So we've brought in the intro string chords again. The profits come back in, and we've taken the JV and the staccato strings out.
Yeah, so we've replaced the other strings with a new piano riff.
Just kind of
Just
a
a
little
bit
hook.
A bit more syncopated. It's again still working over the same chords.
And we just kind of chill it out for the outro, just with the strings, a little bit of vocal and some tape noise and crackle. You can see we've taken the tape noise and crackle out of this section, because when something's really full, you don't really need it, because it's not going to come out anyway. So we'll just use it where it's a bit more exposed and you can actually appreciate it, rather than just having it over the entire record.
So again, it's basically the whole track is based on those 2 chords on the strings that you've had right at the start, and then it kind of returns to that at the end.
And so the project now in its kind of final state is really a stripped version of what it would have been when we were writing it. This project in particular took us the best part of a year to get from start to finish. The idea had been left, hadn't it, in a state, and we came back to it because we knew we wanted to finish it and we wanted to release it, so we started to rework it. We were not actually in a studio at the time, so the record's kind of been finished in different places. We were actually in Ian's spare bedroom for about 6 months.
Yeah. Trying to finish it.
Trying to finish it. We had a small setup in there, so we were just experimenting with bits and bobs in there. We try and do a little bit of mixing as we go along. Obviously, in rooms that you're not really familiar with, that can be quite difficult. But we managed to do a bit in there. We test stuff in headphones, so we will do a bit of mixing in headphones as well. And we rented a studio in Bristol called Invader, and we went in there I think a couple of times, didn't we?
Yeah, just to finish the mix off.
Yeah, to finish the mix. But the actual writing of the track, it's quite a strange process, because when it's spread out over so many months, you kind of forget how things came about. It's quite nice to go back into it and have a look at what you did. So it's just kind of a lot of experimentation. But the way we would have done it is just, like we say, loop a section. The 2 chords are the basis, and then we'll start to pick our favourite bits or pick the parts to which we feel are most effective.
Yeah.
And work from those.
Yeah. We also find that not necessarily everything that we've come up with will use or will work, so that might sometimes form the basis of a new idea. We'll quite often mark down chord progressions or sounds or patterns that we've written and make sure we keep them in future, because they might inspire something new. So that'll happen quite a lot. So just looking at our master, we don't tend to put a lot of plugins or use any hardware compression or EQ on our master. We kind of leave it as open as possible. We've been using the same mastering engineer for years, a guy called Bo at 1087 Mastering, and he kind of knows exactly what we want out of each track now. So we're in good hands with him, so we kind of leave him to do his own thing. But one thing to mention, occasionally we'll use this UAD Pultec plugin, just as is, kind of no boosts or cuts on anything. We've just found that sometimes it'll ever so slightly change the mix of the track and bring out a few elements, like the drums especially. If I just play it without, obviously it adds a little bit of gain, but it kind of toughens up certain parts, kicks and snares. It gives a little bit more oomph too. So we do occasionally use that. Again, like Tom was saying earlier with the parallel compression, we don't use it every time, because sometimes it can. It's too much, yeah. But in this instance, we've kind of felt it improve the mix a little bit. So yeah, we use that. Another kind of revelation in our workflow is SonarWorks. We discovered it not long after we moved into this current studio. We were having some trouble, as you can probably see from the graph. There's quite a big dip, around 100 hertz, around 200 is not great. The top end's okay here.
So this is our room.
This is our room response, yeah. So basically what SonarWorks does is analyzes your room response and then EQs your monitors to try and make your room as flat as possible. and we've found that helpful in mixing. Before using this in this room, we were kind of overcompensating, so around 100 we would be boosting things, thinking that it was lacking where it was actually fine, and vice versa around here, the sort of low mids. So SonarWorks is something we've been using for the last couple of months, and we think it's kind of helped us quite a lot in the mixing stages.
We use it in headphones as well. There's loads of presets already loaded in that you can apply to whatever set of headphones you've got. Again, same thing, just flattens out the response of your headphones.
So yeah, it's not like a perfect solution. You still need a room with good treatment, and this room could definitely be better, but it's definitely helped us.
Yeah.
We've been Icarus, breaking down our track No Sleep for Computer Music Magazine.
If you want to hear the full track, you can head to our social media pages and check out our music there.